Thank you very much. And while my colleague gets everything set up, again, my name is Lars Vestergaard. I have had for about 20 years the nickname Mr. Mobile. And I'm actually quite pleased that, I guess teasingly, my colleagues now call me Mr. Chatbot. I certainly take no offense in that. I think the content that I'm going to share with you for 15 minutes, and then my colleague will do a 15-minute live demo, I'm going to try to give you some best practices and some learning experiences that I've been part of here the past few years within specific the chatbots. And it's interesting, we saw the prodigy this morning, the 14-year-old Indian fella, I believe he was. I happen to be working with one as well, and I can tell you I haven't dared to ask him how old he is because I almost feel embarrassed. I feel like a dinosaur. I've worked with mobile since the Nokia 7110. Do you remember the scroller? Like the Matrix phone, the bottom slid out. I was an IDC analyst and was asked, how can you run ERP on that? And I've been in mobile ever since, but compared to that new prodigy type setup, I'm definitely ancient, but it's awesome to work with these new young guys. So what I'm going to share with you today, it does include a few things that has some future product in there, and for that reason I have to show that particular slide, safe harbor. Gartner is all over the place with good predictions. When it comes to what we are looking at, this whole AI and machine learning and chatbots, they were actually quite bullish a few years ago, and they said there is a mobile app fatigue. I'm not entirely sure that I ditto it in terms of chatbots is now the only route to market, because I don't think it is. It is definitely a multi-channel scenario we're looking at, and that's what I want to try to instill in you today, that for the sake of whatever entity you work with, or you're a student or someone who is interfacing with a young new startups or anything like that, think about how this multi-channel should start to have chatbots in there. Yesterday I was with a bunch of IT guys in another context, and I actually asked them, I think there were about 20 people in the room, and I asked them, so how many of you have either a chatbot proof of concept or a team within an IT context who's looking at chatbots? And would you believe it, 0 hands in the air. And I think that's a bit of a challenge. I will ask you as well the very same question. How many of you in your organization are right now working on or in or have an idea of which team members are looking at chatbots? Let me see a show of hands. That's a little bit better. I'm guessing here's about 6, 8 hands that come in the air. But of course I can tell you that's all going to change, because indeed the channel of chatbots is one that we will see a lot more traction on, because it does provide something to the market. Just very briefly, in what context do I think you should start to think chatbots? Because this happens to be the product that we operate on, but it could be any other platform out there, because it matters that there is a structure. It matters that there is a set of backends, there is some API management. That's super important because you call to some backends. And in all honesty, whether it's an HCM, so human capital management, an ERP, or some kind of on-prem or cloud or anything like that backend, it doesn't really matter. I can tell you the very first best practice I'll throw at you is, of all the dialogue I have in Scandinavia right now, I would say 100% of the companies that venture into this start with HR. The proof of concepts that they're building relate to, we want to let our own people drink their own champagne or whatever we call it right now, but it's a matter of internal testing and trialing. Let's find out, calling some API backends in HR context, how can we do self-service? Guess what some of the most important issues are in that context? Maternity leave, sick days. My child is sick for now the 3rd day running. How do I deal with things? The whole question and answer side, and I have a little bit of info more to go on that. That is super important to consider where to start logically. And why do they do it like that? There's probably some hesitance in terms of user acceptance when it's customers, when it's business partners, when it's this has an impact on my brand, on my logo and everything like that, and there's probably some hesitance. We need to make babies' first steps. Do you remember when Scandinavian Airlines and a few other airlines said, hello, my name is Eva, I'm a bot, how can I help you? That had a picture of a lady. In my opinion, that picture should be a baby, because right now we are indeed making venture into babies' first steps, and we should let the audience know that it is at the early stages. Visual Builder, why does that matter? visual builder, we call it that, but that's a matter of more drag and drop, an intuitive user interface. Gartner calls it shadow IT, because IT has so far been resisting some kind of new developments. What I'm talking to you about right now is to go and talk to the business, go and talk to the marketing departments, and how can they go and work in this. And we are seeing more and more, if not drag and drop, to get the message out, whether in a mobile app or actually in a chatbot, then at least something that is closely resembling that so that they can get going. And then it's the intelligent bot. I won't say that there is a logic way to start, but like the RPA, robotics process automation, we just heard from KPMG, I'm actually now talking to a lot of banks where it's that department, it's the automation department that sits and is looked at as being the ones that should hold the information, where the business or marketing then come and ask for advice. So I actually think that the logical belonging of chatbots should be in that department. And then finally, I'm sure you think about big data as well, the data lake and whatever have you, but having some analytics that shows if one activity starts at activity 1 and you need to go to activity 10 before a purchase, or someone will say, thank you, I've received the help I want. What if they stop at activity 3 or 4 or 5? To have some analysis and run some analysis is ridiculously important in the beginning, because you need to look at the logs, you need to look at the frustration, a little bit like the facial expressions we had before. Is it a matter of, did the user not feel right about this? Was there not a handover to a service agent at the right time so they actually discontinued? When did the messaging that got them to stop at step 3 get increasingly aggravated? When did they start to have 5 exclamation marks? Things like that may indicate that they've actually been upset in the process and you haven't gotten them to where they should be. Very, very easy to segment, I suppose, task-driven. You go in, and we'll show that later on, you find an intent. I want to buy flowers. Which bouquet would that be from Interflora or someone else? I would like to make a banking transfer. We call those intents. And you can code that in as much local language with, here are the 20 likely ways to express that this intent is going to happen. And the other one is natural language. So how do we deal with the natural Icelandic language? I'm part of 6 million Danish people. You are some 100,000. We're all tall, blonde, and awfully handsome. But we somehow are not critical mass. So how do we need to work on this? This is where that prodigy comes in. I'm actually right now working with that young Indian prodigy who has come up with a natural language AI in Danish. He has actually asked me to ask you to come forward to me afterwards and tell me if you are or know someone who can help do this in Icelandic. So that entity that I'm working with there, this young prodigy, has set himself out. He want to develop the Scandinavian languages. Great for an Indian, right? But whether it's the Sami language or it's the Norwegian bokmål, there's so much breakdown where actually a few 100,000 people do matter. And we are looking at working around that in this context so you can get started, because a lot of it, you will not be happy if it's just a cognitive English AI engine that sits at the back of this. But actually that can happen right now because there's Google Translate in chatbots right now. How many of you knew you can get that? You can actually write something in Icelandic language and it travels over and it reaches a Google Translate or a Microsoft Translate, and then it gives you a response back. Then we're into latency. So we're actually looking at putting that translate engine in our server room so that it's not, if you're talking cloud, an Oracle data center that then needs to ping in another country, a Microsoft or a Google data center. So a lot of activities go into getting this right. What's the other possibility that we have? It's actually taking CSV, and I'm actually not a techie, and I actually don't like CSV files that much, but you can, in a Q&A point of view, a lot of you have those natural questions and answers, and you can import that, and there's a tool to get that into a chatbot, and you can look at it and edit it, but then they are in there, and of course that's local language, in this case Icelandic to begin with, and that's supported and run just like that. So in my opinion, there are actually plenty of current existing possibilities for you to get going with those prototypes that I think you should get into. And this is just one example. It happens to be the Q&A for an Apple context, and I've had a little demo running that I'm not going to play live, but that's just in terms of fashion. I would like to deal with returns. And then returns actually gives 2 possibilities where it's an actual return or it's the Q&A about returns. What do we do when it's an actual return? You can imagine you have an item, you have a receipt, you would like to document and show that you are within legitimate, infrequently asked terms, ability to hand that back. But how would you do that? It's a little bit, I've just been in Argentina dancing tango. You ask one question and you get an answer. You ask one question and you get one answer. You will likely not find that to be an elegant way of dealing with things. So think about a new concept that's called instant apps. In instant app terms, you actually launch a formula, you launch an app inside a chatbot. In that instant app context, you can have coded where it's just a matter of ticking boxes, where it's a formula that in a very intuitive, because it's a small form feature of a mobile phone, how can you do that elegantly? And you can actually go onto our website, cloud.oracle.com/mobile, and there's a demo of Chatbox, BOX in the end, where we've made a relationship and show how easy, if you have a dispute as well, that's the demo they show there with a transaction. You take a picture of the receipt and you run a dispute and you send that in, and then once you've completed that, you're back in the chat session. So there's actually a lot of elegance being applied to chatbots where they, if not rival, then at least in that multi-channel point of view, certainly present a lot of possibility to how users and customers can be serviced. And I know I talked a lot about Icelandic now, but we also got to be realistic, because how many tourists do right now help make a super good economic situation in Iceland? That's a lot, right? You've been super successful. I was last night in the hotel with some guys in the lift and asked them, so what brings you here? They said $56 ticket from Pittsburgh. So you can fly for $56 from Pittsburgh to go to Reykjavik. So definitely think about multi-language, and there's an awful lot of technology that it doesn't matter what kind of language you ask for, it'll respond back in that same language. So please don't think in silos of how this should be run when it comes to languages, because there's no need to. The best case study I have right now is Santander Consumer Bank. It's a little bit like some mobile operators like to say this is a first. I think Orange internationally rebranded itself like that, another Orange first. Santander say another Santander first. I think they're the first to come out with contactless, the 3 little Wi-Fi-like symbols on your credit card. They have rebranded themselves to the communicative bank. And I absolutely love it. And that is because as well, we're looking at an international bank that doesn't have a lot of branches. You can't, on a retail point of view, go and visit them. And I know that not a lot of young teenagers that they target drive a car, but if you think about the consequences of you do your banking if you are in transport, you do your banking when it's necessary. Some UK banks that I've worked with said their biggest branch is the train from Reading to central London in the morning, because that's where their activity online is at its highest. I love the fact that this can be done in exactly a car, whether you want to make transactions or you want to work on that. That gives us a lot of possibilities out there. How many of you would like to do business in your car when you're stuck in either bad weather or looking out? Maybe you're too focused on Aurora and all the other great scenarios, but just a show of hand, how many of you would like to do simple things in a car? That is actually about 2/3 of all. So into some context, this is where a lot of the thought should go. And I've got the Alexa and I've got the voice up there. Personally, subjectively, I believe in voice. As much as possible, whether it's Alexa or any other, where voice automation and voice activation can happen, absolutely for sure that is going to be brilliant for us. And whether you choose to be handicapped, like the young prodigy scenario that we heard in the keynote this morning, absolutely loved it. You can imagine that some voice automation to some context would be the only route. I look at it as well as being part of the route. I have the service agent here, so just to elaborate a bit more, and I think it's great that actually I happen to have brought the same image up that KPMG has at their stand here. The ability to make sure that everyone understands there's a customer service agent out there. Do you want us to hand over? Whether it's from the exclamation marks or it's actually based on what it is you are about to ask them. So if it's a bank bot and you're asking for a $1,000 loan, and that is granted immediately because that can be granted at that size, compared to a $20,000 loan to buy a new car, then I'm sure as a customer you are likely to expect, well, you better talk to someone, but at least you've done the first steps. So we have all kinds of other demos where banks are very susceptible to that messaging, that there's a super easy way. So either a frustration or actually a service when it comes to what you want to go out and say. So that service agent should be there, and you hand it over and you have those discussions. And the other one I just want to talk about before my colleague does the demo is indeed monitor your bot with deep analytics. That is so super important in the beginning, because that's where you need daily, hourly to sit and say, wow, that is a great expression someone has asked my bot to do, and for some reason, on an intent basis, it just didn't quite understand it. So let me just code it. Let's hit train, not my dragon, but train my bot to make sure it gets in there. The last thing I want to say, and you can start to set up your demo, Stefan. The last thing I want to say is I absolutely love what Sony and Robbie Williams have done, or Robbie Williams. His last record was actually by Sony, marketed via chatbots. 1 million conversations on the first day of Robbie Williams going to market, reaching his audience via a chatbot service. Of course, it's been marketed on Facebook and other means, Snapchat and what have you. But somehow the discussion around what is this album all about, 1 million users of the chatbot. And I think that shows the strength of where it can go, whether you're targeting the young or whether you're targeting the employees. But again, think POC, work with us, talk to us. Start announcing hackathons. Start working on hackathons. I'm an active member on the meetup community, not just on the big hip things like Kubernetes and Docker and doing things in GitHub, but actually what are we doing in the chatbot point of view. In Copenhagen there's a very active community, and in all the other Scandinavian countries there are. Maybe it's my inability to write Icelandic that causes me not to be able to find a chatbot community here. If it's not here, start it. Start having these communicative discussions, and with that, thank you very much. Happy to take questions. Now we're going to have tech fun. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, so now we've seen a lot of what the future brings. I would actually like to show you how easy it is with the Oracle chatbot to actually set this up, because it is quite trivial. So our chatbot is divided into 5 sections, and they kind of go for different audience. So the very first one we have is the one we look at here. This is where we set up intent. Intent is what we actually want the bot to end up doing. We need to figure out what is it that the person on the other end is actually asking for. Then we have entity. So we also sometimes need to get some variables in that is being picked here. I'll show you in a second. Then we have something that is a bit more for the maybe it will show. Yeah, there you go. This is now we're starting to get into where it gets a bit technical. This is actually how we explain the flow of the bot. This is built in something called bot-ML, which is basically YAML, so yet another markup language. We will be coming very shortly with a graphical UI for this, so that you can drag and drop your flow. Then we have all the connections to the backend. This is also something for developers. We normally work with APIs, so the chatbot itself will figure out what is it that you actually really want, and then it will connect to an API and talk to the backend, get the information that it wants. Finally, the last section is where we can set up the different channels that we want to run it in. This hasn't been set up to anything. The most normal thing in Denmark would be Facebook Messenger, since almost everybody has Facebook, but we can do WhatsApp, Slack, majority of the chat services out there. But anyway, I would like to focus on the stuff that is fairly easy. So this is where you will actually do the chatbot. This is where Icelandic or Danish or whatever else language that you want to build it in is actually coming into the picture. Because first and foremost, we need to figure out what kind of intent is it that we would like this chatbot to work with. In this case, this is actually the proof of concept for the Santander bot. And in here, we're talking about different bank transactions. So we would like to be able to show a balance or we can send money to somebody, or we can track spending, or see the latest transactions we've done. So these are the 5 intents that we have. That means that when you talk to our bot, we know that we have to end up in one of these 5. We just need you to tell us what it is. And in order to do that, we need something called iterations. So iterations is our initial way of figuring out what would you ask for. So for instance, if you want to see a balance, then what's my balance would probably be a good word for it. But there can be other things. So up here I have I think I have around 10. Yeah, I have 10 different ways of saying what's my balance. If I look at, for instance, send money, then I can see here, you know, pay is probably one of the good ones. The interesting bit is that we can always add to it, but it will also extract from this. Via machine learning, it will learn how what you're asking about, and it will continuously to improve. So if we go up here and look at the balance, I don't have this set up to my mobile phone right now, but I can go up here and do a test. So I can now, down here, say, what's my balance? And hopefully it will reply back to me here, because it actually needs some parameters as well. Because what's my balance? Well, on what? What is it you want it on? Your checkings account, savings account, or your credit card? I can either point to this. This will be finger press as well on the phone, or I can type checkings, for instance. But now I'll click on checkings, and it will tell me what my balance is. I could also have just said, what's my balance on checkings? And then it should instantly know. That's always when it's only checking. That's because this one here hasn't been properly trained yet. There we go. That's still a bit annoying, this one. So how do you actually train it? This is the interesting bit, because when we have to see an intent, we can go here and we can say, all right, so if I say, what's my balance again? It will come up here and say that that there's 88% chance that I'm actually asking for a balance. There's 37% chance of this is a transaction, and then another 37% for track spending. And I know it's not 100, but hey, that's how it works. The thing is, that it's fairly confident that what we're doing right now is balance. You can set this up to have a threshold that will be good for you. So if you say that 80% is okay, then as long as we're at 80%, we'll go ahead and think that is actually what you're talking about. I could also say, if I just say pay, it's fairly certain that I want to send some money. If I say pay mom, it actually says it goes to 84%, but now it also say that it's pretty sure that I want to send that to my account for mom. And that's because in my entities, I've set up different account types. So let's see, where do we have it? To account is here. And here I, for instance, have mom. I can also add extra synonyms for it. For instance, I have set up for my savings account. I've said that, yeah, it's called savings, but it could also be called savings, vault, or the vault. And that brings me to that I'm actually able to now, hopefully, do something that is slightly more tricky, something that it doesn't know about. So I should be able to say, do I have gold in the vault? Hopefully this will work. And it does. I can tell you, it's nowhere know that I've set up gold. It knows the vault, that is savings, and then it assumes that I'm actually asking about that. So this is the simple bot. So this one is not really working with a lot of AI right now, because it takes a little longer to train it. So I didn't have the time to properly train it. But while you're sitting here, so let me again show. If we go over here, and we find something. So what could that be? I could say, do I have money? Even though that it says there's a likability of 87%, I could say here, well, but I would really like this to be 100 because I'm pretty sure a lot of people will do this. Or in my log files, I've seen that that a lot of people is actually writing this. I can then simply go over here. I'm on the balances, so I will add this as an example. And you can see it actually came just below the other one over here. But now I've added this. All I then have to do is train my bot. I won't do that because then we'll have a little longer than I have left to talk. But basically, this is how you do it. It's a very simple interface. And normally what you would do is you would get people that you're targeting. So if you're targeting younger people, you will get them to come in and do these iterations for you, because those are the ones that will actually know what we're talking about or what they are talking about. And that means that they don't need any programming skills for this. So in order to set up the entire bot, you don't need any programming skills. When it comes to the end, when we actually have the intent, then we need somebody that is capable of setting that up and mapping that to a back-end interface. So, for instance, here from payments, you can see I have an API that requires a lot of parameters. It will then actually call back into my banking backend. Because that I'm on a mobile phone, it will know who I am. If you want extra security, it could send a text message to you that you have to type in first. But then it is actually able to communicate with the backend and then come back. So you have to think about chatbots as just another way to fill in a form. This doesn't do anything else than if you're sitting in front of your computer and you're filling in your form, or you're going on your home bank and typing around until you find your actually account and see what's on it. This is just an alternate channel, and it's a fantastic channel because it really targeted young people. Like, for instance, this chatbot thing. You know, I'm a rather old gray-haired guy, so whenever I go on my bank, I'll always open my computer, I'll log into my home bank, do all the security. Then I'll figure out how much money I have. If my son, he's 19, if he needs to figure out how much money he has on his bank account, he would call me. That's how that works, right? But I showed him this app that I made on my mobile, and you know, he was instantly, he's on Facebook Messenger all day long. And then suddenly he just becomes friends with this bank, and when he's friends with the bank, he can talk to it over Messenger. So he'll just say, yeah, do I have any money? Yes, it will tell him how much money he has. All right, I actually, I need to send some money to my mom. So he could probably go in and say like this, pay mom $20. I know it's American, sorry. From the vault. Let's see if that works. It didn't. It didn't get mom. That's a bummer. But there you go. Now it at least sent $20 to mom. So, this is what's always happening whenever you do live demos. Not everything is working. That's how it is. So I think that was more or less my time up as well. I think this is really interesting, and I'm pretty sure that you'll find the interface quite simple. If you want to talk to us about it, come by. Lars and I are here. We're down at our booth as well. And I think that was it. Thank you very much.